and you're in this tunnel of noise, which everyone loves for the Ironman finish line, and you cross the line, and it's like, all of a sudden you're done, you're finished, and you're struggling to comprehend what you've just done.
That's age group and Nick Pocock talking about his first Ironman finish. And this is Age Group Stories, brought to you by the OxygenAddict Triathlon podcast. Hello and welcome to the OxygenAddict Triathlon podcast. We're brought to you every week by our sponsors PrecisionHydration.com. Electrolytes in different strengths that match how you sweat. You can get 15% off your first order with the code OxygenAddict15. And we're also brought to you by Thriver.co, the simple finger prick blood test you can do at home to track hormone, vitamin and mineral levels in your body. You get 10% off all subscriptions with the code OxygenAddict10. All right, everyone, welcome to the show. I'm pre-recording this one. As you're listening to this, I'm going to be away on my hollybob somewhere. So we've got a special Age Group Stories edition. I'm bringing you the story of Nick Pocock. He's a working age grouper. He's an extremely busy guy. He's finished 6 Ironman triathlons, and he works full-time as an airline pilot, flying backwards and forwards across America. So he's got a great story because he's made some really good progress over the last 3 years with us. And he's a great example of somebody who gets the training done, gets the work done with no excuses. He's often spending 3 or 4 nights a week away from home, staying in hotels. So he doesn't have that sort of regular ability to just get on the turbo downstairs or just go out for a run before work, because he's literally always in a hotel somewhere else, and trying to make the best of the situation where he can. But the thing I really love about Nick, he eats, breathes and sleeps Ironman, and he's always got a tremendously positive attitude. He's just an all-round great guy, and I think you're going to really love the interview that we've got with him today. Before we go into this, a couple of quick things for you. You can still take part in the Oxygen Addict Triathlon Podcast Power Hour on Zwift, Tuesdays, 7:15 p.m. UK time. You can just find that in the list of official events in Zwift. Workouts that I've written, I won't be there this week, but someone will be there in my place leading the workout. We all stay together on the screen. We're going to do an hour of structured interval training to give you a faster and more powerful bike leg for your coming race season. So if you've not taken part yet and you're on Zwift, come and join it. It's a fantastic way to get your hard interval session training done. I guarantee that you're absolutely going to love it. And just before we go into the interview, I just want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Precision Hydration. You can take that online sweat test. You can get a good lead as to whether you're a particularly heavy or a particularly salty sweater. And if you're wondering why that's important, if you've ever struggled with getting cramps when you're working out, if you've ever struggled with getting cramps in the middle of the night, if you've struggled with getting back from workouts and being incredibly thirsty about an hour later after you've got back despite having drunk, it's a good lead to the fact that it's the sodium that goes alongside drinking water that's the important part of staying hydrated, as well as drinking the water, obviously. So pH make electrolytes in different strengths. They make them from 500 milligrams of sodium all the way through to 1500 milligrams of sodium. So they're much more concentrated than the traditionally, like Gatorade and stuff like that, but much more effective because you're getting much more of the concentrations of the sodium that you're going to lose in your sweat. So head on over to precisionhydration.com and learn more about their services there. Like I said, free to take online sweat test. It's just a few questions. And you can use the code OxygenAddict15 to get 15% off your first order with them. I absolutely love this company. They make a fantastic product. They absolutely keep me cramp free. I'm a really, really salty and heavy sweater. So for me, it's an integral part of my indoor training. And with that, without further ado, we're going to go over to this week's interview of the week with our age group story from Nick Pocock. Let's kick it off. Right, Nick Pocock, you're joining us from where in the world? What time in the morning is it? That's the first thing to go.
I am in Minneapolis, a sunny morning, and it's about just after 8 o'clock in the morning. Nice summer's morn, as if you will. Nice indeed.
And where are you from originally?
From the UK originally, from Buckinghamshire, small little village in the middle of nowhere, as I tell people over here, close to Marlow, Henley, that area.
All right, okay.
Which now apparently is a mecca for bicycling and triathlon, which is a shame because it never was when I grew up. If I saw a bicycle, someone must be lost where I was back in the in the 90s, but now you can't throw a stick and not hit a cyclist at the moment.
Well, that's the UK.
It's a lovely part of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, good stuff. All right, and then your triathlon journey. Then let's talk about how far into Ironman and all that you are, and how you get into it in the first place. First up, how many Ironmans have you done? At this
6.
point? 6 Ironmans. Which ones have you done?
I started off with Ironman Nice because I wanted a flat course.
Nice easy intro.
That my French training friend who decided to get me into it said, it's okay, it's just a little bit hilly. And as we came in over the top of Nice on the descent in the plane, I looked out and thought, because I'd been there when I was 8 years old, didn't comprehend what an Alp was.
Right.
Didn't ever have a need to cycle up a steep hill. As we descended in, I used a number of expletives to describe him, his false accusations that it was a little bit hilly. And I've been doing this 8 and 10% hill back and forth that lasted about a minute and a half where we are, because Minnesota is quite flat generally.
Okay, right.
There's some short, steep hills, but nothing alpine. And that was an eye opener.
Bet it was.
Expectations how I could do this in 13 hours, maybe 14. Maybe 14 and a half. But
so,
then...
as the plane came down, you had the realization that Nice really is right next to the Alps. It's right there.
Like, really? And then he, casually says, oh, well, yeah, it was a Tour de France stage as well. So, it'll be fine. It'll be fine. And the other trouble is even though I love to swim, I do possess a fundamental fear of the open water.
Okay.
I don't like it at all. I've just about handled lakes these days, but oceans send the heart rate ratcheting up. But oddly, if I'm in a pack, it doesn't nearly bother me as much.
Okay.
So then swimming through a bunch of jellyfish in the race kind of compounded that fact. So it was a fascinating start.
And Nice is was it still a mass start back in the day when you did it as well?
So in 2012 when we did it, it was the washer machine and some. Yeah. And I don't think I was quite aware of what that was like on that scale of 2,500, 3,000 athletes going hell for leather. And it turns in, you kind of do this self-grading where it starts on the outside where the slowest are, and the middle is the quickest. So the theory is it becomes this nice little arrow. And so I thought, I'll have a go about an hour and 5. And so I'll be close to the middle. And off we went. And it was, to say, I had absolutely no idea where I was going, because you had no sense of relativity in those mass starts in those days. And it went like any Ironman. I think they schedule it a bit better now, but you have all these ideas of what you're about to do. And then you have this outer body experience, because it's just a frothy white mess of feet, hands. And amazing, I didn't get kicked or punched once, but I had absolutely no idea what was happening for about 10 minutes. I was just flailing.
Yeah, I'm just realizing, Nick, I did Nice in 2012 as well. We were there at the same time.
Oh, really?
We had the same experience on that beach. So and the other thing about Nice is the beach itself is those big, round, white, foot-killing rocks, isn't it? So the honker goes and you run into the water and you're like, ow, 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 ow. And you're trying to pick your way and there's a big surge of people behind you pushing you into the water. It's mayhem.
We have actually got video of it.
Okay.
And it really is, someone described it as March of the Penguins. Yeah. Where all the penguins jump in. Because a bunch of humans in black, what's it called? Wetsuits, neoprene, all flailing around. Neoprene, thank you. And it really is one of those experiences you cannot do justice just talking about it. If you haven't been in there. And I think it is an experience to behold. I don't think it's the best way to start a triathlon. But at the same time, people who've done it think it's a rite of passage as well, which I understand equally.
If you live through it.
If you live through it. Which someone did not in Ironman Nice that year. Or they definitely suffered some kind of heart attack, if I remember rightly.
Oh, really?
Someone's so
okay.
That does happen. I think the Rolling Star is a brilliant way to go. However, to have that under your belt as your first Ironman swim start is a great story to have.
Yeah.
The French just are no nonsense, aren't they? Just go out and do it. Go out and swim. It's just the Alps. Go and cycle up them for 7 hours.
The thing I remember is that there were 4 boys out in the water for a 2.5 mile swim. You kind of looked to the horizon and you were aiming for a yellow buoy, and they were massive until you get in the froth of the arms and the legs and stuff swimming towards that. It must have been at least 1 kilometre straight out from the beach, maybe even more to get to the first buoy, mustn't it? It was I remember looking at it and going, they haven't put the buoys out yet. All I can see is that one on the horizon. Oh, wait, what?
I remember the beginning was just people, arms stretched out with fingers pointing as people said, no, it's that one. And it's that one. It was an Australian exit too. So
that's right.
And you cut across the course.
Yeah.
So it was a big triangle, but then a smaller one that did cut over part of the longer course.
Yeah.
It was actually it really was a calm day. It really wasn't. It was very gentle sea swim. But I remember the kayakers too, the safety kayakers who were meant to be the intermediary boys were drifting. And there's this picture. I remember being by myself in that swim, completely alone, which is not something that I hold high regard, being alone in the ocean. And I look over and I just see the group of athletes the pack I was swimming with. What are you doing over there all of a sudden? And there's a friend of mine snapped a long lens picture, and there's this big old bend, and the kayaker just drifted. So everyone was trying to get as close to the buoys as possible, or the kayaker buoys.
Right, okay.
And they just drifted in. And there's a big old bend with 100 athletes going around trying to get to this kayaker, thinking they're doing the shortest route. Yeah. And I remember realizing I had to pick a hotel to swim towards on shore, no matter what, because the hotels never move. And I was very confused at the time, but now seeing the picture, I realized what happened.
Yeah.
But it was very unnerving. It was that moment where your heart just jumps just a little bit, and it's already high enough as it is. So
I remember aiming for there's a big casino, isn't there, just by the Australian exit, looking up at the furthest buoy and thinking, that is so far to get back to the.
Everyone does. So my first ever triathlon was in 2005 actually, and it was up in Estes Park, Colorado. Okay. And you think July is going to be warm? It's about this time of year actually, but it's a snowmelt lake, so it is bone crushingly cold. Yeah. 57 degrees, 55 Fahrenheit. Yeah. Which what is that? 12, 13, somewhere around there.
Swimming in Snowdonia, isn't it?
Yeah, and I had a short wetsuit because it's the only one I could borrow. And the collective lean that athletes do when they say, so you're going to swim out to that buoy down there, and everyone leans forward, and you hear this internal groan. It's like, you sure that's only 3/4 of a mile or whatever it is? And that was how it was in Nice. People just looking out and thinking, bloody hell, that is a long old way. Wonder how many jellyfish are between that. Are there any sharks? That's what happens in my head anyway. Total panic.
How was the rest of your day? How was your bike and your run that day?
Well, I got stung by a jellyfish in the face. I initially thought an athlete had punched me and scratched me, but then it kept getting, the sting didn't go away. It kept amplifying. And fortunately, we've got hat, goggles, wetsuit, so it was like a little bit on the end of my nose and part of my cheek. And this poor French doc, I jump out of there, and the poor French doc I'm screaming, what's on my face, in English, and this French lady with the pharmacy sign on her chest just says nothing. I don't know, why is this Englishman yelling at me? and I was like, all right, well, I just mechanically went through transition. Like, your thoughts are fantastical and uninformed about jellyfish stings. So you think, am I going to collapse? And fits or what's happening? And just suddenly I'm on the bike. Suddenly I'm cycling towards the airport. And then I'm cycling up a hill that's inexplicably steep for whatever. And it's just an alleyway and people are weaving everywhere. And all of a sudden you've forgotten that you've got this sting that hurts. And you just, you ride up this enormous climb that you realize that on a TT bike is grossly misplaced unless you're very good. Which, again, all the gear and no idea at the time. I had this wonderful TT bike, same one still, and it was completely out of place in Ironman Nice. But the bike was long, it was painful, because I just kept coming around those corners on the climb. You think, oh, it's flattening out. I'm coming around this kind of this little flat pit that is literally just going around the ravine to the next one. And you look up to your right and you see this little dot of a human on a bike still. And they seem like they have literally launched themselves to the top of this mountain. And you're like, oh, God, that's a long way to go.
It's hard to get your head around it if you've not ridden in serious mountains. It's hard to get your head around how long, like riding uphill on a bike for an hour and 20 minutes, an hour and 40 minutes. It just doesn't seem to compute with your head that hills should be over in 10 or 15 minutes maximum.
Yeah, it truly was a classic case of thinking you know everything and then someone having, and I think that's really healthy as a human, to be a bit cocky and then having this whopping rug yanked from under you and humbling you very, very quickly. And that's how I felt that the bike on Ironman Nice was. It's like, oh yeah, I could bike up a hill, no problem. And then 20 minutes in, like, I wonder where the end of this hill is. 30 minutes, and I didn't deal with the bill very well. I got very nervous. I was quite anxious, as a lot of people are. But all that anxiousness went away on the hill because you've only got one thing to focus on. But everyone knows the elation of when you get to the top.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh my God, that's over. And I didn't think I could do it. And then it's like that in Ironman. Every time you think it's over, like, I can't do this anymore. Somehow you suddenly get to the next section and you've done it. And you're like, oh, here I am. Oh, look at that. And then you're elated just enough in time for the next meltdown. You know? And it's like, oh, I made it. I was worried about getting to the top, and now, oh my God, I'm going around hairpin bends on a descent that's terrifying. But 20 minutes ago, I was worried about, oh my God, I can't make it to the top of this climb. And now I'm like, oh my God, am I going to crash and die on the descent? And you realize that Ironman's just compartmentalization the whole way.
That's right. Yeah.
Every time you think you're dying, there's a next minute, you think you're the king of the world.
Awesome.
And no matter how tired you are, you know, the famous phrase is on the run, which I absolutely love because I'm no longer biking. That's it. I don't love my bike, I'm not going to lie, but I love running because I'm not on a bike anymore. And I will say that the people on there, everyone asks, how are you doing? And of course, you want to turn to them and say, how the F do you think I'm doing? I'm halfway through a marathon and an Ironman. What kind of stupid question is that? You know, but at the time you understand it. You understand why people ask you those questions. So the run was unbelievable. I mean, you know it well, obviously. But it was long, and
it was hot that day as well, wasn't it?
It was
really,
warm,
really hot.
Particularly down by the airport. I remember getting quite a nice breeze, but you did that, I don't know, a mile or so around, where you loop around to do the turn around the airport, and there's a privacy fence that blocks all the sea wind, and it goes up about 20 degrees back there.
Yeah.
And that's where you see everyone dry heaving and dying, and you're like, oh, no one told me about this on triathlon. Why is this person in distress? Does anyone have a medic around? You know, oh my goodness, what's happening?
It's funny how they don't show that on the TV coverage.
No.
Isn't it? Yeah.
But you realize that they're fine, but the first time you experience it, you don't understand what's happening. You know, I didn't know my body could do that. But as you learn more throughout your Ironman triathlon career, you realize you get to understand your body so much more. You look back on those days and you kind of give a chuckle to yourself. because you're there running, you got one guy who's lying in a triathlon outfit, like you think he's going to die, but really he's just didn't hydrate well and his stomach can't handle what he's putting in, just a fluid point of view. And then there's a fella sunning himself on the pebble beach, completely oblivious to any form of exercise that you're doing and wondering, why are they doing that to themselves? And there you are then getting a fourth bracelet, running past the Hotel Negresco and thinking there's nothing else in the world that's going to take this away, because it is a feeling that is inexplicable to anyone who has never experienced it before, because every minute you think you are done, you cross the finish line and you're convinced that you've died 6 times on that race and there's no possible way, and you suddenly realize all that stress that you've carried for, me, it was 14 hours and 19 minutes the first one, and you've carried this ball of stress with you, because psychologically it's stressful. No matter how well you deal with it, you can deal with it very, very well. The really good athletes just deal with that stress very well, and some of us deal with it a little more, have a little more stress on our hands during a race, because you think something's going to happen every time, and then you cross that line and it's all gone. And the elation of being in that home half a mile, even the last mile, everything just disappears when you cross that finish line. And all the pain, the suffering, and everything that you think back on is just gone. And now the hardest part is climbing stairs.
And the hardest part is signing up for the next one.
Yeah. Well, surprisingly easy, unfortunately.
Really? Go on, there's a story there. Go on.
Well, you sit there and you romanticize it. We all do. I mean, what they call it, the dreaming season in October, November. We sit here and you've forgotten this, that, and the other. Mates of mine had, we did, the fifth one I did was Coeur d'Alene. It's last year. And 2 of my mates who were there with me got some kind of food poisoning and still raced, because it was kind of mild. But they absolutely were dying out there. And I was having the race of the century for me, which is not very fast, but it's still, my body was just coming together and I didn't feel bad once that day. And some days those happen, it's fantastic, and some of the days it doesn't. But these 2 boys, I'm trying to be ecstatic and just thrilled with how chirpy I am. And these 2 boys are just dying out there because they're going through hell to get around. And they do it, though. They absolutely succeed and do it. And 2 years later, they're like, let's do another one. I'm like, do you remember that last one? Do you want to, and we just romanticize it and we do it again, because we have that last 100 meters is intoxicating.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah. So what was your experience like of the last mile of that first Ironman in Nice then?
There's certain things I remember really well. The 2 ladies who called me Nicolas, and I said it's Nick, actually. On the 4th time, they'd seen him 4 times. I remember my mum and dad. I remember seeing my mum, who's the most quintessential English woman in the world, holding a can of beer, which is just unfathomable for my mum to be drinking outside a can of beer, and having an out-of-body moment thinking, what is she doing drinking that beer for? These various things are like, and then you hear the noise and everything disappears. And I couldn't tell you much about the definite details of the last 100 meters. You see faces you recognize, but you had this euphoric level of experience where I was holding the British flag, the Union Jack, and running down, just couldn't believe I had there. And you're in this tunnel of noise, which everyone loves, for the Ironman finish line. And you cross the line and it's like, all of a sudden you're done, you're finished. And you're struggling to comprehend what you've just done, which is just ridiculous to the majority of people, why you would even think that's a good idea. And you also then ask yourself, why did you think that was a good idea? and it's it's just like the Ironman. Unless you've done it, the mass start or the Ironman finish shoot, it's really hard to describe the euphoria of finishing. I think as an age group anyway, obviously the professionals are on a different kind of experience as far as their earning, and you're purely there for yourself. You learn, I think you cross that finish line learning. You've unpeeled a piece of your skin that you didn't think you had, and there's so many layers you've experienced that you didn't know. A certain level of suffering you thought was impossible for you to experience, and then realizing that you're able to come out on the other side of that suffering and completely succeed on the backside of it. And then it's almost like you cross the finish line, you turn around and you shake your own hand and say thank you to this fictitious self that you've been wrestling with. I didn't know that at the time, but having read a couple of those psychology books, if you will, the Brave Athlete and things like that, and you learn that there's the monkey brain and the chimp brain, and really you're thanking them both for harassing you for the last 14 hours, and that I think that's part of that euphoric feeling. And then you hit the pasta bar.
Yeah, it's worth saying that it's good food at Ironman France.
It's top food.
They do a good cafe afterwards, better than a lot of places.
They make you walk over the steps, though.
Yeah,
you've got to go up and over a bridge, and you're like, this is sick and twisted. How good is that food down there at the end of those steps? Because there's 20 of them, and you better be the best food ever. It is. It's fantastic.
Do you remember what was going through your head when you signed up for your first one? What was it you were looking for that you signed up when you signed up for it?
I don't think you know at the time. I think at the time you do it, you're looking to test yourself in a way that you don't comprehend at the moment. I think, initially it was the Olympic triathlon. And initially it's people, little peer egging you on, little peer pressure, do the half Ironman. And then when you do the half Ironman, you're like, oh, wow, I did that. Okay. I could probably double that. Of course you don't. No one doubles their time from half Ironman. They 150% normally, right? Or add at least an hour to it. And so when you sign up, I think the first time it's a lot of a bit of peer pressure in a good way, and you just subconsciously searching for something that you're going to plug a gap in your psyche with. You don't think you challenge yourself enough, or you're trying to cope with a life situation that this is going to be an outlet for. Because when you're out there training for it, I find it meditative. Yeah. When you're out for long periods by yourself in this world where you cannot get out by yourself, right? You're with the phone, I'm a victim of it. The phone and technology and things like that. But when you're out on your bike, I mean, you're just alone, really. Typically, you might be riding with someone, but you're away from it all. And so maybe you don't realize at the time, but you plug that gap in your psyche to test yourself, even though there's no way you think of it at the time. We had a sign-up dinner. We all got online, spent ridiculous amounts of money entering a race, and had a dinner, and it all seemed celebratory. There was 3 of us going, and then you get there, and then you're like, oh.
I've not heard of that before. Actually, that's an interesting idea to have a kind of celebratory. We're all going to do this, get together, and all sign up together at the same time. That's a really cool idea.
We had a nice dinner before dinner kicked off. We all signed up together. Bit tougher these days with the whole COVID, but I think it's definitely doable in a virtual or a distance way. And then we had a nice dinner afterwards. One of those, we're going to do it, nervous dinner. Because 2 of us are first-time Ironman, and the Frenchman was his 3rd. So he had some experience under his belt, for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
So
you've got Nice under your belt. What are the other 5 that you've done then? In order.
A very long way of describing my first triathlon. Sorry.
First good. Ironman. That's exactly what we want to hear, man.
After that, I did the ill-fated challenge Henley was my second one.
Okay.
And that's because it was down the road. Once I discovered there was an Ironman in my backyard, it was done. That was a challenge, obviously, in a completely different way as far as temperatures and And the fact you've gone from a 3,000 person race to a 600 person race is a completely different animal when you don't have that's being surrounded by all the people who are suffering. You're surrounded by some, but there's a lot less. And I think Europeans generally are better at Ironman or more competitive as a whole. It's not a one and done as much in Europe as it is over here. So you have a lot of people at the back taking 16, 17 hours and just, I'm doing it once and that's it. I just want to do it. And in Europe, it seemed a lot bigger proportion of the field were very much farther ahead of me, and I was out by myself for a lot of that race. So that was interesting. It was lovely to cycle around all the places that I knew and run along a towpath I'm familiar with. But that was tough. It was proper cross country for parts of that with no worn trail. So it was definitely one of those races that I understand why it went away. I mean, it wasn't logistically. It was idyllic to swim in the Thames along the Henley, in the fog, where you can't actually see the person next to you, which is somewhat unnerving. But I don't think it's logistically feasible. That's why I moved to Weymouth after that.
Yeah.
But they had their own struggles, I think, with tides and seas and things like that. But that was Henley. I remember it as the last Ironman I got to do with my dad on the course. So that was a good experience. I often fondly think of running over the Henley Bridge with him running next to me, asking me, how you feeling? And me turning to him and saying, how the F do you think I'm feeling? That was a very emotional race, hometown race. Did a lot of crying on that run. Lost it a few times. Had the young nieces for the first time right next to me, best friends and everything. And so those emotions, you tend to feel more secure letting them go.
Yeah.
Than you might around people you don't know. So you're a little more restrained in foreign lands, but you just let go because it's your hometown. You're happy, you're more comfortable. And so I did a lot of bawling on the last lap of that run.
Bless you.
And then, let's see, after Henley would have been Ironman Boulder. I did the first Ironman Boulder.
Oh, yeah.
Which was the biggest meltdown in the history of the world I've ever had.
Really? What happened
Yeah,
there?
it was my slowest time. I was sick. I was ill the week of the race. And I like fever the weekend before. And by the Tuesday I was recovering-ish and flew in the Wednesday. And I thought, you probably shouldn't do this, but then you take the step. You probably shouldn't do this. You step again. And then suddenly you're at the start line at the Boulder Reservoir wondering, I'll probably be all right. And it was a really poorly designed course. It's much, much better now. Actually, they may have even cancelled it, but it was better after that. I mean, did this 112-mile massive loop around out in the full exposed 100+ degrees Fahrenheit heat.
Wow, yeah.
And I just took 3 steps on the run and started walking. And the first half marathon was horrendous.
Really?
Battle of weak body and weak mind. And then I had this revelation halfway through the marathon that I just needed to. I remember that it was an out and back where you finished the first loop, and I saw a family and friends supporting me, and my words were or something along those lines. And I went to the next feed station, realized if you don't take on food and energy, it won't get better.
Yeah,
so,
of course.
Why don't you just try walking for half a mile, but actually consume food that's going to be digestible?
Were you actually able to kind of take it in at that point?
Yeah, so I had the best banana I've ever eaten in my entire life, 5 cookies and a bag of chips. And it was like someone turned on, it's like watching Popeye take his can of spinach, we're in back at that cartoon and all of a sudden the muscles come on and you're like, I feel $1,000,000. And I come back around and my family just said, it's a completely different person.
Yeah.
And it's just sometimes taking the time when your chimp brain's going 1,000 miles a second saying, give up. Come on, this is not worth it. Just go to the pub. It's much better there. There's beer.
Yeah.
Give up. And then just having that calm down and realize, okay, your body's not processing food because you're running. So suck it up. You're just going to have to walk if you want to finish this. Forget your time. Forget that you were sick. It doesn't matter. You're here. Get some food on. Let your stomach digest it, and off you go. So that's what I did, and it worked out. It was a terrible, painful, awful race, but got it done.
Well, do you know what? I think those ones are important to talk about as much as the good races are important to talk about, because you could have pulled the pin, you could have stopped. It probably, arguably would have been more sensible to pull the pin and stop. But the fact that you keep on going through it and you actually make it to the finish line, I think teaches you can do much more than you think's possible. It's also good for people listening to this to hear that, I think often I'm guilty of having interviewed pro triathletes, and it's always, such and such has just won this race and it went perfectly. For most of us, our races don't go perfectly most of the time. And it's really important to hear these stories of like, okay, I kept on grinding it out. And you know what? Looking back on it 2-3 years later, I'm really proud of myself for having got through it.
I think a lot of people, a lot of the age groupers that I see have seen out there have done a lot of racing now after the last almost 10 years or so. And I've seen the ones who are very analytical, very precise, run 10 hours or less the first time they go out and do it. But they've really analyzed every little last detail. And that looks great to us normos, if you will, people who don't have the time, desire, or willpower to do that, and then just do the trial and error method. So I like to think I've got it somewhat dialed in. I know what my body's going to do at certain points and what I've got to feed it at certain points, but that's because I've trial and error over 4 or 5, 6 Ironmen. Yeah. And Boulder was a big one like that. That taught me a massive amount. But again, that goes back to why I do it, to learn more about myself. I mean, the first part of that 100 yards of that marathon, I had these solid chews that I was experimenting with. No one ever should do that, right? In the middle of the first.
I'm laughing because I've been there as well, mate. Yeah. Like, and I dropped something them. I thought I'd try. Yeah.
Well, I dropped them. They popped out of my little sleeve pocket on the side of my vest. And I just looked down at them. And I had a serious discussion whether I had the energy to bend down and pick them back up. Fortunately, a spectator did it for me. And then you go into the second half of that marathon, and you start the first half never happened. So you realize that you don't want necessarily to experience that again. So you learn how to not have to go quite so buried in those experiences. And I've used the method of trial and error. It's just experience teaching you that. And in my profession, we have a phrase, so you have a bag full of luck and a bag full of experience, and you hope one fills up before the other one runs out. And
I like that.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that a bit, because you're a pilot,
Sure.
aren't you?
Yes.
Are you a commercial pilot?
Yes. I fly for a US airline over here.
Okay.
And domestically over here is, the whole of Europe over there. So you're flying 4 or 5 hour flights at a time. Throughout the country, North America, that kind of thing.
So how'd you go about on a weekly basis then? I'm presuming if you do a 4 or 5 hour flight, you'll stay wherever you get to, and you won't fly back the same day, or will you?
Sadly not. Yeah, a lot of the times. I'll give you an example. This week I fly from Minneapolis to San Diego, which is about 4 hour flight, chock to chock, and then San Diego back to Detroit. So, that's 8 plus hours of flying in a day. And I'll sit there looking at the schedule that's been put out for us and think, all right, what is feasible? Because I'm starting at 6 a.m, so I probably can't do the run before. So what's feasible for me to achieve once I get to the hotel? What kind of hotel am I in? Is the gym good? Is there access to a pool that I can use a tether on, for example?
Yeah.
Do I have any other choice? but to get it done. And you will always tell me I have a choice, but it's a bit different subjectively when you're like, no, you just got to get it done. Just deal with it. And those days, even though physiologically are not recommended by certain coaches, the psychological benefit you have of toughing it out, which you also acknowledge, can be quite valuable when it comes to the day where you're faced with the situation during the race. You're like, you just got to deal with it. Yeah. And that applies to Ironman Coeur d'Alene that I've done twice. And the first year was 110 Fahrenheit. So 38-ish.
Yeah, wow.
I think.
Scorching.
And then the second time was about 33. These are just total anomalies out there. And you go up to race with all these ideals, and you're in the middle of this race, and the volunteers are fainting from heat exhaustion and are running out of water.
Oh, wow.
And you just sit there and say, okay, it doesn't matter. I just have to just cope and deal with it. And those days when you're flying for 8 hours and then you say, okay, I'm going to go out and run for an hour and 15 minutes or on a treadmill for an hour and 15 minutes, it's going to be tough. But the psychological benefit, not only digesting the day, which again, you get quite meditative. I do when I'm running. And I find it psychologically a huge release. And that will apply to race day when you're given those situations. And as everyone will tell you, do an Ironman, that's the easy part. It may hurt at the time, but really, psychologically, everyday life, juggling work and training is really the hard part by far. And the race you just got to do in one day. Right? It sounds so simplistic, but the race is the celebration. It's the parade at the end of the training. It's the trophy parade as you get the medal for all the stuff you've done for the 6 months prior to that. And all the breakdowns, the bad bikes, the crap runs, and then the brilliant runs, and the, oh my God, I'm going to crush it bike rides. And then that's what that race is for, is to acknowledge what you did for 6 months.
I think that's a really good way of looking at it, mate, because I think if you look at those competitors out on an Ironman course, you can look at them and say, well, these are genetically blessed humans. These are people who exercise comes easy to them. And I think the reality is often it's that what we're looking at is people who will make the time to do that training no matter what. They will carve out the time from the beginning or the end of the day, no matter what. And it's the no matter what attitude along the way that gets them into that position to be able to finish on race day. And I think there are lots of people who sign up for a race thinking they're going to be able to do it, but find that they can't apply that attitude along the way. And that's what you really find out about yourself then, isn't it? You've got these, it shouldn't be a surprise on race day. You get what you deserve, because along the way, you've got this chance to build these habits that when things become really difficult on race day, you get to find out what you put in the 180 training days leading up to it, I think.
Yeah, there's no doubt that you see the people, even the people who take 16 hours, are coming across at midnight or 11 or whatever it is. Those people have also are taking from their training. Yeah, they've had a tough day, or they've given everything they can that day, and that's their time that day.
Yeah.
But everything they did leading up to that day is being utilized to move them forward towards that finish line. And that's, I think, especially late in the night, people love, no matter how broken you are, going back to the finish line late at night is just, I challenge people not to get emotional on them, because they've been out there 4 or 5 hours longer than you may have. Yeah. And you'll get caught up in their joy and their excitement, because you realize they're going through such a longer day than you have and experience all those emotions for a longer period than you have. So you were caught up in your own emotions selfishly on the course, but then you get to see them come up and say, bloody hell, they've got 4 more hours of this under their belt than I do. This is amazing. The psychology behind it is unparalleled for me as a triathlete anyway. I think they're the fantastic, especially at Roth.
Well, we'll talk a little bit about Roth then, because what point in your sort of Ironman career did you come to us and get coached by us? Was that after number 2 or after number 3?
That was after Boulder.
After Boulder.
I found you through an I Am Talk interview you did. About reverse periodization, I think it was talking about. And I was like, oh, that sounds like a really good theory. I'll buy into that. And then, so that would have been for Coeur d'Alene, the first one. And I've done 3 with you under that. So Coeur d'Alene, the first one, was definitely knocking time off. No, that was not actually, take that back. That was a 14+ hour day because it was 110 degrees and all bets were off.
Right, yeah.
But then all of a sudden,
line, wasn't it?
Yeah, but then all of a sudden we took an hour and a half off that time at the next race.
Yeah.
So we went from 14 and a quarter, I think, and we went down to sub 13, which to me was a big deal.
Yeah.
And then some smart ass said, I bet you can go quicker than that. And I said, I doubt it. That hurt. And you said, no, I think you can get close to 12. And I said, no way, let's go 12 and a half. He said, I think on a fast course you do it. And I wanted to do Roth before. I got into Roth actually and not taken it a number of times, just because you just got to be quick on the mouse, right, to get into Roth. And so when I went to Roth, I knew it was a quicker course. I knew I was still shit at biking though. And I still took off half an hour off my bike time.
Yeah.
And not only that, but got off the bike and I couldn't wait to get out the transition. I was like raring to go. And part through your training, I would say part better nutrition and part the people around you is just, no, you cannot begin to understand what you experienced during Roth as a race. It's unending. You have these very short periods of alone time followed by a small village with beer tables lining the length of the entire street, edge to edge, people cheering you throughout the entire day. And then Solar Hill, Solarberg is a little taste of professionalism of bike racing for the regular Joe like myself. And then the run is just amazing. And I shot out the run like a cannon. And I was not telling you, I had serious Achilles issues that I had not necessarily shared with you. I got out on the course and thought, let's just see how this goes. And it just worked out. Just some days your bodies just give you it. And then you come into the stadium at the end. And by the way, everyone tells you Roth is flat. It's a load of rubbish. It's not flat, but it does lend itself to you still biking fast and running fast.
Yeah.
But the canal is extremely flat, and a world of white dust kicked up from the path. And then you go back into town, and they said, "Oh, by the way, you got to just do this quick loop out to Buchenwald and back. And by the way, there's a hill, a pretty serious climb through the woods in between there. But don't worry, you'll be back in no time." And of course, it goes up and down, so you have to do it twice.
Yeah.
But then it doesn't matter because you get back into town, and you got people along the entire way. Just non-stop noise and people who are completely invested in the race 100%. And I have never experienced it anywhere where every bit of the course, Ironman Boulder, there were signs saying Ironman go home, you're not welcome.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And
wow.
So you come to Roth where so many people are in the road signs, welcome to the world, the triathlon state as you get in the area or the triathlon county. And everyone just absolutely wants the best for you. Yeah. And there's such a thrilling feeling when you're out there and you know that everyone just wants you to do the best you can today. And it's addictive, very addictive feeling. And they build a stadium for you. And you come into this stadium. It's, it's not a massive, 100,000 people stadium. But they built it just for you to finish. And everyone's going mental. And when you're in that stadium late at night and the fireworks are going off and people are coming in with their glow sticks on, it's something else.
Nice, man.
You sit there completely giddy from that feeling for a couple of days.
Would that be your favorite of the races that you've done, do you think?
There's not even, there's no one that touches Roth as far as, because I think for a race, you initially race for the challenge. And then when you start getting comfortable with the challenge, you start looking for the experience. And Roth gives you that in spades. I think as far as the most epic course, if that's what you're looking for, Nice has got to be.
Yeah.
It'd be hard to beat Nice for the epic nature of the course. I mean, I know we've got some extreme stuff out there now, like Norseman and Keltman and these overnight races. But as far as just back to Ironman itself, Nice is hard to beat for that.
And it's great because you're in the wilds the whole time as well, aren't you? After the first 5K out of Nice, you're just in the middle of the mountains, and you've got the crickets or whatever the little dudes are that chirp away when it's roasting hot, and you're doing half a kilometre an hour up there.
Well, you notice you never see the cyclists' faces either, except for one tiny section of Nice where there's an out and back. Yeah. You see backsides the whole time, which is quite unique. Yeah. And the officiating's really strong there. Yeah. I mean, they were screaming at us for drafting uphill, which I point out to them. I don't think there's much of a draft effect at 4 miles an hour, mate. But okay, fair enough. I just can't go any faster. Let me get up the hill. Yeah. Just I'm in the 14-hour group. Let's all just settle down now. And I think nowadays though, I'm searching for experiences instead of challenges, because I now know I've achieved it 6 times. I know I can finish an Ironman. So now I want to throw in the experience level too. Yeah. And I've said to myself that Roth is maybe Nice, but Roth is definitely the only one I go back and do over and over again. And I don't think you can tire of it. I really don't. If you got the money and you've got the speed of typing and clicking, back in the autumn, then it's one I would do again and again. Yeah. So it's a joy.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about your training and your progression as an athlete then over the last few years. You mentioned you knocked off hour and a half off the Ironman time over a couple of seasons.
Yeah, so in Roth, it was 12:03. Let's not talk about those. Just let's not talk about the 3 minutes. Well, I was too busy celebrating. I had absolutely no recollection. My batteries were dead. No idea of my time. I thought I might have been under 12 and a half. And at points apparently I was going to do 11:55, but I really just didn't. I had stuff in the tank to give, so it was a bit. We don't talk about those 3 minutes, Rob. It's best not to. But to come, it was 14:19 was my first one. Then I went to 13:55 at Henley. But then I regressed to like 14:35 in Boulder, the complete implosion. And then I had 110 degrees in Coeur d'Alene. I thought, am I ever going to figure this out? And that's when we got going. And then all of a sudden it was 12:50 something, 12:47, something like that. And then suddenly it was 12:03. Yeah. So at the beginning, it was all 2012 was all about as much as you possibly get, 18 hours a week. Come on, peak time. Let's just get out and do these long bike rides followed by these enormous brick runs. There was a time I was doing a 6.5 hour bike ride followed by a 2 hour run. Yeah. Which was rough to say the least.
The Hell Weekend, I believe that used to be called. The Hell Weekend.
It was all about volume, even then, back as recent as 2012. And then, there's your kind of theorizing came along, like saying, okay, you don't need to do these crazy days of 20 plus hours. So there are people who do that and it works for them. But for people like myself flying around the world and people who have enormous work days, you don't need to do that. You can benefit from short, intense training greatly. And that's when we started getting on board, and I found that my body did respond to that very, very well, and started got quicker and fitter, and that's what benefited me there is the shorter weeks without the huge volume. My body just doesn't like that massive volume.
Yeah.
It'll get it done, but it doesn't necessarily make it quicker.
That's a key thing, I think, isn't it? There's no one's going to tell you not to do that, because to a certain extent, everyone goes through that phase of epic training is fun because you're doing something you can't believe you can do. You know, to do a 6.5 hour ride and a 2 hour run on the same day is awesome. You know, it's brilliant to be that fit, but it's hard to sustain it. And it's very hard to sustain it around a family life, a working life. So it's great that we found a way to sort of find those speed improvements for you while cutting the training load almost.
Well, you sit there and the novelty of explaining to someone, it's that famous cartoon on YouTube, the digital cartoon of, why are you going to bed at 8 o'clock? Oh, I have to get up and do a 6-hour bike ride because I'm an Ironman.
Yeah.
You know, at 4 a.m, and it's a big facetious digital cartoon. And that novelty is there. You say, hey, I'm going out for a 6 and then a 2-hour run. And people are like, you're nuts. And the novelty is there for about 10.5 seconds, maybe, as they comprehend that. And then you walk away and you're like, yeah, I did that. Well, no one cares but you, really. People think you're bonkers, and that's the novelty. But you're the only one that cares that you did that more than anyone else. And you realize that that's really not of any benefit to you whatsoever. You do not gain anything with notoriety or novelties. You gain stuff with a specific quality of training.
Yeah.
And yes, you do need to do those days. I mean, we have the big weekend, as you call it, in preparation for an Ironman. But you only have to do that a couple of times. And it makes it so much more manageable when you have to do, okay, the next 3 weeks, I'm going to be busy, and then I've got the Ironman, but I'm not going to do it for more than that.
Yeah.
And the body responds. I mean, the body's like, okay, I'll give you this for a little bit. I'll get used to this. But, you see the guys do the Deckers or the 50 states and 50 Ironmans, 50 days. The first 10 are horrendous, but then their body adapts. And your body will adapt from volume. It just does get used to it. But psychologically, it may not get used to it.
Yeah.
Like you may be suffering, your body adapts, but does your mind benefit from that? And then you fall out of love with it, and by race day, you sit there and you're like, whatever, don't care anymore. I just want this to be over. And race day is meant to be a celebration, like I said. And I will tell you, the second, third races I did were like, just thank God that's done. Thank God that's all over. And that shouldn't be the way, should it?
That's
it should
right,
be a joy.
Yeah,
it should be an absolute joy. That and the Henley and Boulder, all I can think of is thank God I don't have to do that training anymore. And that was one of my first thoughts, really subconsciously under it all. And that's not a good place to come from.
Well, do you know what, man? That's a pretty good place to leave it, I think. That's a pretty good place. You've managed to get yourself faster and faster over 6 Ironman, and I love your attitude of, I'm enjoying doing the training, so I'll keep racing because I'm enjoying the training, rather than I have to do the training because I want to do the racing.
I would say that just one last tiny thing is that having your group with us, having solidarity with other triathletes, with the group training that we've discovered in COVID, and having people there to share your suffering is a major part of why this sport's better for me this year than it has been before, because it's been a very lonely sport. And I think the mistake in triathlon is an individual sport, but I think you can only benefit from having other people sharing your joy and your suffering, because you will gain great gains from those other people that you may not get by yourself. And that's a massive part of OxygenAddict for me.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah.
All right, man. Listen, thank you very much for your time. It's been great talking with you, Nick.
Yeah, thanks very much.
All right, everybody. That was Nick Pocock. I hope you really enjoyed another sort of taste of age group interview. We got such great feedback last time that it's nice to hear a story, isn't it, from another normal person. Well, not normal, that's the wrong way to describe any of us who do Ironman, but Nick is incredibly busy, family man, full-time pilot, flying around the world, still manages to get his training done, still manages to improve year on year, and more than anything, I think the thing that comes across is his just the passion for the experiences and the races and the people that he's met along the way. So really enjoyed talking with him. He's been a long time member of our team now. I think it's coming up on maybe 4 years, certainly 3 years. And he's such a positive guy in the group. He encourages so many people, and he really sort of gives people that sense of, yeah, you can do this. You absolutely can do this. Make yourself do something that scares you. You're capable of doing more than you think you are. And I just hope some of that came across on the interview for you guys all to listen to. I don't know about you, but certainly listening to his stories about Roth makes me go, that's something I want to go and do. I've had personally 2 entries to Roth in the past 10 years where I've not been able to go for one reason and another with family circumstances. I'd have loved to have done it back in the day. I'd love to go over there and experience it, and even more so hearing Nick's stories there. So it's kind of fired me up to want to go and do something. So I hope it's done the same for you as well. That brings us to the end of this week's show. As always, I'd love to know what you hear of what you think about it. You can get us on Twitter at OHTRI Podcast. We're on Instagram at OxygenAddict Triathlon Podcast. And if you haven't done already, you can join the Oxygen Addict community Facebook group as well and leave your thoughts on there for us. Here are some discount codes and deals for you to wrap this up. Precision Hydration, you can use the code OxygenAddict15 for 15% off your first electrolyte order. Thriver.co, you can use the code OxygenAddict10 for 10% off all home blood test subscriptions. And if you're interested in finding out more about Team Oxygen Addict, you can contact me and the team using the link in the show notes. You can book a call to talk about your training and find out how we can help you. Hopefully, like Nick, knock a couple of hours or more off your Ironman performance. So remember, there's links in the show notes for all those sponsors so you don't have to remember them. And until next week, have a great, safe training and racing week. I'm Coach Rob Wilby, and you've been listening to the Oxygen Addict Triathlon Podcast. See ya.